Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Mary Ellen Dombrowski, president of the Connecticut River Valley Chamber, and we're here today to welcome Tom Hine, Capital Wealth Management. He's one of our industry experts who's going to be sharing about a great book that he's written. So a little bit about Tom. Tom is a certified financial planner and a 25-year veteran of the financial services industry. He's founder and owner of Capital Wealth Management, LLC, that has offices in Glastonbury and in Wilton, Connecticut. He acquired 7 practices since 2004 and conducted due diligence on more than 100 others. So he knows what he's talking about when he talks about acquisitions and other things. Tom's also been practicing Shotokan karate for more than 35 years and is a 4th degree black belt. In his latest book, The Zen of Business Acquisition, Tom's main goal is to help other small business owners succeed in retirement planning, succession planning, and future mindfulness. He hopes to do this by sharing some of the nuggets of wisdom he's learned over several decades of successful acquisitions and extensive martial arts training. So good morning, Tom.
Good morning. Thanks for having me. All right, so I will start with the first slide. Can everyone see that first slide?
You can go to, that was the intro. You can go to the next slide.
Yep, okay.
There you go.
So I'm excited to share with anybody, on the call today or on the video, 2 things. One, whatever I talk about is applicable to anybody of any type of business. My focus is financial services, but I'm going to share with you some generic things that I've learned over my years, my 25 plus years in the industry. But I also want to weave in some of the martial arts philosophy that really helped me both become a published author, but also helped me through the acquisitions part. So if you think about this, it's a mixture of Eastern and Western philosophy. So we know that, the Western is more sort of pragmatic, by the numbers, get it done, grow your company, make lots of money, which is all good. The Eastern philosophy is one about health, wellness, mindfulness, for those of you that study that. And so there's a nice mixture of the two. And with all the interviews I did for the book, I tried to weave in some awesome quotes at the beginning of every chapter that help you focus on what the important takeaway is, for that chapter. Okay? So with that being said, the beginner's mind, one of my favorite quotes, which I'll read to you. If your mind is empty, it is always ready for anything. It is open to everything. In the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities, but in the expert's mind, there are few. And I was thinking today, there couldn't be a better time for a quote like this, because when you think about what COVID has done for all of us, right, whether it's our business life, our personal life, or family, it has thrown everything upside down. So in a sense, we are all beginners right now in this new world, whether it's working from home, working from the office, social distancing, you name it. But what I want to share with you on the acquisitions part, no matter what business you're in, it's also a great time to look out there and see what opportunities there are. For example, on one of my coaching calls recently, I heard about a plumbing supply company that was looking to expand in upstate New York. I also heard about a restaurateur from a different city who was looking to expand, his restaurant footprint because he had gone online so quickly. He actually built up more business from his takeout than his initial dine-in restaurant. So there are a lot of stories of entrepreneurs out there who are taking this challenging time and they're sort of rotating it and saying, what can I do, to grow my business or grow my clientele? And that's what this is about. So that's the beginner's mind quote. The next one, the true purpose of Zen is to see things as they are, to observe things as they are, and to let everything go as it goes. Zen practice is to open up our small mind, okay? Now, just giving some philosophy on my 35 years of martial arts training, what we mean by small mind is not that our physical brains are small, but oftentimes, in life, we focus on everything happened to us, my world, my car, my job, right? My husband, my wife, my girlfriend, all that's important. But what this sort of Zen aspect is to open it up and say, as we go about our daily life, whether you're in acquisitions and buying multi-million-dollar companies, or whether you're going to yoga class, with your fellow yogis, the point is, it's to open up your thinking to observe the world as it is and not be so reactive. And I'll just give you a couple of quick stories on that happened. Years ago, when my first practice came on board, it was over an hour and a half away down in Fairfield County. And the initial seller said to me, well, you're up in Hartford. I didn't think you'd have any interest in buying my practice because I'm so far away from you. And I said, well, Connecticut's a small state. And by the way, an hour and a half is no big deal. So we ended up talking it through, and it became was my first acquisition. It became one of my most profitable because I opened up a new market. Now, if I had thought about at the time, my market being just Hartford, I never would have gone and looked an hour and a half away thinking I can, grow my practice that way. And since that time, I've looked at practices as far north as Bangor, Maine, and I've actually bought a practice in Florida. So looking at the whole East Coast now was my target market, but it started from the one decision to open up my mind and think that I could take what I do, 90 miles away and do it what they call downstate. Okay? So that's the idea of the true purpose of Zen. Now, this is the fun part. I interviewed all these top-notch people in our industry. Terry Mullen of Truelytics. I'll go through them quickly. David Grau, Sr. of FP Transitions. Dave Devoe of Devoe and Company. Dan Kreuter of Gladstone Group. Carolyn Armitage was especially helpful of Echelon Partners. James Hughes of Live Oak Bank, and then Ron Carson of Carson Wealth. And the reason why I interviewed all these people, if you're in my line of work, which is financial planning, wealth management, helping people and individuals manage their money, you want to go to the best people in the country on the idea of the acquisitions. So what I did, for example, Terry Mullen in Truelytics, he developed this amazing software to help evaluate the profitability and the value of any given company that somebody might want to sell or buy. Well, why would that be important? The first thing your accountant or your attorney is going to tell you if you're interested in growing is to go out and get an evaluation, right, of the company, in my case, of the company you want to buy. But if you're selling, you also have to go out to get a valuation to see what your company is worth, okay? So Terry Mullen developed some fascinating software. He's out of Boston. Dave Grau, the second gentleman listed of FP Transitions, is on the West Coast in Portland, Oregon. He developed the first, believe it or not, the first site for mixing and matching buyers and sellers in our industry. Ironically, it was over 15 years ago he developed it, and they used to call it, at the time, like the Match.com for financial planners, meaning you could meet people all over the country, exchange information, and decide if you want to sell to someone or you want to acquire them. And Dave, ironically, he wouldn't remember this, he's done 10,000 deals, but I was one of his first clients back in 2004, so I couldn't resist writing about David Grau Sr. and seeing how his company has grown over the years. The next is Dave Devoe, Devoe and Company. He works at the higher end, which is about $500 million and up of assets, what they call the mergers and acquisition business. He's out in California, and that's where the really big companies go to get advice from people like Dave Devoe if they want to capitalize, bring on more partners, if they want to sell out, if they want to transition. He is really working with the heavy hitters out there and has been for quite a while. Dan Kreuter and Gladstone Group is out of Pennsylvania, and Dan also works with larger net worth advisors, generally $500 million of assets under management and larger. Dan has a nice approach, which I take some of his chapter in a few moments and I share that with you. And Dan shares what are the things you should learn if you're going to be buying a practice or merging. What are those things that should accrue to you, the buyer, to make this whole deal worth it? So Dan Kreuter, think of him as an East Coast version of what David Devoe does. They compete in the same universe, but in some cases, they don't exactly. Because Dan Kreuter comes from a human resources and corporate strategy background, a little bit different. And by the way, there's no affiliation. My firm, has no ownership interest in any of these firms. They're not my clients. Other than industry professionals, I don't know them. I might see them on LinkedIn, but I have no sort of monetary ties with any of these people. They're just all stars in my line of work. Next, one of my favorites is Carolyn Armitage of Echelon Partners. Carolyn had a great story to share with me. She's also in the book about somebody who grew up almost on the individual financial planning side, and she worked her way up through corporate America, and now she's a partner with Echelon Partners, which again is a California-based firm, and they work on not just mergers and acquisitions, but they would help firms of even my size. I'm at roughly $250 million or $250 million of assets under management. They would help my firm if I were to develop a strategy of growing or succession planning or things like that. So typically her firm will work at the low end of 250 million all the way up to about $1 billion and up. So certainly her firm and the vision they shared with Echelon is competing with the David Devoes and in some cases the Dan Kreuter. So when I interviewed the people, they all knew they would be in the book, and they all had a chance to review the interview before it went to publication so that they could correct anything. I want to make sure they knew that their competitors would also be reading what they wrote. Next is Jane Hughes, Live Oak Bank, another one of my favorites. This is about the financing. When you go to acquire a company or sell one, you also often have to borrow money, to make an acquisition. So if you're a buyer or seller of any industry, whether you're in restaurants, resume preparing, COVID-19 safety issues, anything you want, if you're looking to grow and expand, you often want a source of capital. In this case, Live Oak Bank happens to specialize in veterinarians and financial planners. Those are two of their different target markets. I've never used them personally. I've never needed to, but I wanted to interview them for the book because anybody writing a book on acquisitions or mergers and acquisitions, you obviously have to have a chapter about money. Who has the money, who can borrow it, what are the terms and conditions, and then how does that fit in the overall transaction? So James Hughes was really great with his time and sharing with me the lessons that he's learned in working with financial advisors. But no matter what industry you're in, you really want to make sure you have a good banker or a good contact person to help you with the financing, okay? And last but not least of this group, and there's more that we talk about, but Ron Carson is clearly the A-lister in our industry. He's out of Omaha, Nebraska, so he's not far from where Warren Buffett lives. And Ron, I've been in his coaching program for many years, but he has really been a trendsetter over the last 20 years in our industry. And he's now written, talked about, done presentations everywhere about his acquisition strategy, which are typically firms of 500 million to 750 billion, to 750 million to over $1 billion of assets. So again, he's an independent entrepreneur, and he's built his own unique process at Carson Wealth and Carson Partners. So when you line up all these people and the others in the book, I try to give every reader, whether you're a small firm of 25 million of assets, whether you're $1 billion firm or anything in between, I want to give everybody something to read about where they could learn how to grow their practice. And if you're in a different line of work, I'm happy to take questions too at the end on that. No matter what line of work you're in, I can share some wisdom of what's happening now. Because the world has been turned upside down with COVID, there are so many opportunities to acquire, merge, partner, you name it. We're working on right now our 8th acquisition in the last 10 or 12 years, and we see no end in sight for the type of work that we do. So we're excited about that. Okay, these are some statistics called open market averages. And again, every industry will be different, but this is the financial services industry I want to share with you. So typically, whatever line of work you're in, you're going to want to know what are the statistics, whether you're in, again, plumbing supply, restaurants, resume preparation, or technology for that matter. In our industry, you're going to see that the average firm being sold last year was 28 weeks on the market. Now, this is all, don't forget, pre-COVID information, right? So it's going to change this year. So that gives you an idea of how long, like listing a home, if you will, right, in real estate, how long you were on the market before you completed a deal. The average transaction size was about $2.5 million of value. To work backwards, I'll give you a rough estimate. That would mean that those companies averaged probably about $50 to $75 million of assets, maybe upwards of 100 million. So they were at the smaller end of financial services, but still, you know, in any business, if you're managing $100 million, that's still a nice sum of money. So that gives you a range of their average transaction size. Notice the sellers were 61 years old. So that's kind of interesting because most firms thought they would wait till they're much older, but a lot of sellers were deciding to make the transition before COVID. I expect the trend to continue even more so. Here's the cool thing. The average transaction was roughly from 44,000 at the low end to $11 million at the high end. So that gives you an idea of, and this again was from FP Transitions. You'll see them in the right-hand corner. That's David Grau's firm, the one that I told you years ago. I was one of his first clients. So 11 million was the largest deal, 44,000 was the smallest. The recurring revenue multiple, not to bore you with accounting, but basically what it means is if you have revenue coming into your firm every year, let's make the math easy, $100,000 of revenue, they're saying that roughly you could sell your firm for roughly 2.65 times that, or again, $265,000 would be the revenue that you would expect, you know, or the purchase price on a practice of that size. I'm being very generic, but to put it in scale, 100,000, if that's your revenue, you know, 2.65 times that is what you would actually sell for. And this is the other amazing fact, 85 inquiries per listing, that's an amazing number. That means for every seller out there in our industry, there are 85 potential buyers. Now, they're not all going to end up buying, obviously, but that tells you what the ratio was and why I want to share with our audience today. No matter what line of work you're in, when you start having 30, 40, 50 inquiries per listing, you know you're in growth mode. And that's a way you can actually take your ideas and grow your own firm or partner with others, because this is clearly a trend that's going to continue for a while. Okay? This just gives you the idea of the sources of compensation. I'll go through it quickly. If you see the left arrow called low degree of predictability, that means one scale you want to be careful of is insurance commissions. That's at the top, meaning if you're getting a commission or what we call a transaction every time, that's no longer the preferred way of doing business. Think of when I hold up my iPhone, right? Think of all the apps that you sign on to that are what they call monthly revenue or paying for service. That's exactly on the right-hand side when you look toward the end where it says third-party managed assets or fees. So any business that you're in, when you can create recurring revenue, and I just use the phone as an example, right? Off your phone or off your business model, that makes your line of work, your practice, your intellectual capital, it makes it more valuable than somebody who gets paid only, for example, if they sell a car or only if they sell an installation, you know, for your house. That's a different way of doing business. And today, everything is much more automated. All right, gross revenue, multiple by range. I just want to point out on the left-hand side, you see fee only. And that means, think of this as recurring revenue. That's what we mean. And that means that these firms, and we're more in the line of a fee-only firm, they can get upwards of, you'll see the bar hits about 3 times gross revenue at the high end, and the low end was about 2.25. And what that means is, depending upon your practice, how many clients you have, how you structured it, your staffing, your technology, those were the ranges, and that white box was sort of the median. You know, half the practices went for above, half went for below that. Notice if you're commission-based, or what we call, you know, one time with a bit of trail, you have a slightly lower multiple. And then to the far right, if it's transactional, yeah, there's still value there, but far lower, right, than where you would be in the top left-hand corner. So we're trying to share with everyone, whatever business you're in, you want to make that recurring revenue your stream. That's going to give you the most value. Okay, I mentioned Dan Kreuter earlier of the Gladstone Group. This is really great. One of the quotes, if you're fully prepared, you need not worry. So this was the case where Dan was so well prepared for my interview with him, and he shared there's 5 things you should take away from your buying, okay? Buying power, solutions and service power, brand power, staying power, and people power. I'm not going to cover all them, but these are things you should accrue if you're going to be buying a firm, okay? Next, Echelon Partners. This was Carolyn Armitage. She covered 3 key aspects. Know where your firm fits into the M&A landscape. Know the psychology of the seller if you're a buyer, right, or vice versa. You need to know what's in their mindset, and know that valuation only has meaning in context. The valuation will change over time, okay? The art of integration. This was a human resource manager I spoke to. I love this quote. When it is obvious that the goals cannot be reached, don't adjust the goals, adjust the action steps, by Confucius. So this particular HR executive in a high-tech firm, he gave me some key takeaways, right? HR is a key component of a culture fit. You want to handwrite in advance the pros and cons of any acquisition before the deal is done. And do not underestimate the importance of culture, because if you don't get the culture right, the whole thing will blow up in your face, okay? Ron Carson had a great quote, one generation plants the tree, another gets the shade. That's a Chinese proverb. So Ron says, surround yourself with great people. So be the librarian, not the library, right? Know how to get the information. Don't worry about having it all yourself. And then succession plans should be discussed with your team and your top clients. After all, if your clients don't like who you're picking as a successor, well, then you should revisit that. And then add coaching programs to your to-do list. And I know Mary Ellen mentioned earlier, there have been some great presenters this summer for the Chamber of Commerce that talk about coaching programs. I'm in 2 of them myself. I think they're invaluable. All right. Slide 13. This is a great one from Lao Tzu. When you're content to be simply yourself and don't compare or compete, everybody will respect you. So when you're talking about an acquisition, a lot of people go out and do it because they hear that's the thing to do. And I'm saying don't run out and do one unless you know about these 6 things: the culture, the valuation, the client service, perseverance, the beginner's mind, and traits of successful acquisition. So before you want to be that restaurant growing out to maybe acquire more restaurants, or the resume writer, doing more resumes, whatever business you're in, the book will cover these 6 key aspects you really want to get down, because if you don't get them right, you'll actually really probably mess up your first acquisition, or if you're selling, you won't get the right price for your business, okay? So we want to make sure you're prepared for that. And this is one of my favorite quotes. Chris Voss said, prepare, prepare, prepare. When the pressure is on, you don't rise to the occasion, you fall to your highest level of preparation. And Chris Voss, he's not in the book, but I picked up this only a week ago at a great coaching program online. He was one of the chief hostage negotiators for the government a long time ago. And what he's saying is, by always being prepared, in your business every day, if something falls into your lap, you're going to default not to some magical rise to the level of the occasion. Whatever level of preparation you had is what you're going to default to. And I want to make sure everyone knows that. So if you're a one-person firm or a 50-person firm or whatever, it's the daily routines you build into your practice that matter. And when my first acquisition came along in 2004, it was out of the blue. Nobody told me how to do these things. I had to figure it out on my own with the help of my attorney and my accountant. But the point was, you have to build some successful steps in place to be ready. And that's why Chris is saying you actually fall or default to your highest level of preparation. Okay? So with that, I'd be happy to take some questions, regardless of what line of work you're in, and hopefully share it again. This is just the tip of the iceberg, but this is information I want to get out to all of you to help you grow whatever line of work you're in, to help you grow by acquisitions, partnering, strategic partnering, you name it. This is the way of the world, especially since COVID has sped all of this up. So with that, I'll open it up to any questions.
Tom, I have a couple of questions, but I want to say, even if viewers aren't in the acquisition position right now, your quotes are amazing.
Thank you so much. It took me a whole year of researching, different books and all, but thank you so much. That means a lot as an author.
Really great. Couple of questions I have. Why do you think business owners tend to procrastinate?
Business owners procrastinate for a few reasons. One, all of us get inundated every day, right, with what's on my to-do list. What do I have to get done? What's my biggest client? What's my biggest opportunity? So it's natural when you're focusing on that, it's tough to step back and go, well, where am I going 5, 10, 15 years from now? And what do I want, do I want to put in a succession plan for the next generation of owners? So people put it off because they're overwhelmed, they're confused naturally, and they don't know where to start. So it's easier to put off down the road something that doesn't have to be done today.
Thank you. That makes sense. I do have one from another question. Can you speak to the value of knowing the mindset psychology of the buyer?
Yeah, great question.
A story of experience where this paid off.
Yeah, so that's a great, and there's a whole chapter and there's a good graphic in the book about this. So knowing the mindset of the buyer, and I've made my share of mistakes, is so important because oftentimes a seller will tell you things like, I can't wait to get out of the business. I want to sell. I want to retire. I want to go to Florida with my wife or my husband, right? They say all those things. What I've learned is watch their actions. That Zen quote in the beginning about just observe. So I'll give you a couple of cases where it worked to my advantage. In some cases where I blew it because I had to learn. So my very first acquisition, the one that I mentioned in 2004, was by a gentleman downstate, toward the Fairfield County area, who said to me, and keep in mind, I had no knowledge of how to do these at the time. He said to me, I really am looking to transition my practice. I want somebody who's a younger advisor, with a team. And I really think, I want to move on it now. And I asked him, his name was Jim, why would you want to sell at this time? And he told me a true story. He said, I have a good friend on Cape Cod that passed away unexpectedly, and his wife got no value for his business because he didn't have a succession plan. So boy, that was a true story for him, and it was his motivator of why he wanted to sell, okay? So that's one good example. On the other side, I chased this seller for about a year. He was in a different state, probably less than 2 hours from here. And for a year, I would kept calling him, arranging meetings, talking about stuff. And I realized toward the end, when I finally asked him, would he sign a confidentiality agreement just to begin negotiations, he shut down and said, I have no intention of selling. So what I learned was, instead of spending a whole year running around now, early on, we want to have people sign a confidentiality agreement. It doesn't bind them. It doesn't force them to sell. It simply acknowledges in writing that we're going to share important information. And if they can't sign that document, which is the beginning of a process, they're in no place to actually sell your company or buy your company, if that makes sense. So those are, I've got many, many more examples, but those are two great ones.
Thank you. Thanks, Tom. And another question is, what are the biggest valuation mistakes that buyers and sellers tend to make?
All right, so this one is really good, especially for those of you that own a house. If you do, how many times have you seen, if you've ever bought a house, that the seller, typically wants a value that's always above the asking price? Although I know in today's market that's actually happening because of low interest rates. But think about this. The seller always thinks their house is up here in value, right? And your agent tells you it's down here. It's what they call this myopic bias. So they only see the good things about their house, right? They don't want to talk about the bad things. So if you're selling a practice, it's good to have at least one or two outside people give you a valuation, because they're going to give you a sobering number. It may not be the number you like, but it's more likely a realistic number if you get two different companies helping you do a valuation. I have seen this time and time again. An advisor says, oh, my practice is worth $1 million. And I've had people tell me on paper it's worth about 200,000, right? So in their mind, they think it's worth 5 times that. And when I shared with this person the accounting information, I said, your pie in the sky number doesn't match reality based on what we call market fundamentals. So that's a big mistake. On the buying side, the buyers like myself get so excited, to finally grow, that you tend to overpay for your first practice because you're so excited. That's not necessarily horrible if it gets you down the path of acquisitions, but if you have a good accountant, and a good attorney, they'll give you advice on what the ranges are, and at least you should know if you're overpaying and what are you getting for that. So if you're going to pay 10% more for a company, maybe you like their location, maybe you like their staffing, maybe you like their tagline, but you at least want to know you're overpaying for it. But if you've got really good advice, you should really look to pay market value for a market benefit. So on the selling side, you always think your company is worth more and you want more people to give you valuation. On the buying side, you want to be eager, but not so eager that you jump in and pay, market multiples above what is reality based, if that helps.
Do you need special accountants or attorneys for these kinds of deals?
Yeah, so in my line of work with financial planning, you do. Most accountants, I think, can crunch the numbers. I'm more worried about the attorney because the agreements that you sign legally are specific to financial planning and asset-based management. So there are certain phrases, industry rules and regulations and all. So you'll definitely want to find attorneys that can specialize in that. Again, if you're in the restaurant business, that's a different attorney, right? Or the plumbing supply business, or you're in COVID-19 safety business, there's always experts that know that line of work and do a lot of those transactions. You don't want to get someone who's learning on your, on your practice for the first time. That's not a way to do a good deal.
Well, Tom, this has been extremely informative. I want to thank you so much for sharing your expertise, but also what you've done to write your book, The Zen of Business Acquisition. It's really fascinating. And
well, thank you.
I just want to thank you for being with us today as Tom Hein, Capital Wealth Management. And where can people reach you if they have any questions?
Yes, so they have a couple ways to reach us. You either can go actually, online, some self-promotion here, and look at the book online, but below you've got Tom Hein at Capital WM, so it's my name, and Capital WM is short for Capital Wealth Management, or my super fantastic associate, Kelly Gallivan. You can reach out to us. And really for anyone on the call, even though this talk is about acquisitions, if you're a budding author and you want to write a book, I'm happy to share. This is my second book. I'm happy to share with you information on that, because writing it is a whole different process regardless of the actual topic you're writing on. But that's how they can contact us.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It was really a great, interesting talk. We
Thank you
appreciate it.
so much. Have a great day, and if I can help anyone out, let us know.
Thank you.